So, how do we know?
A couple of people coming in.
Okay. Do you hear me? Hello. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here for this panel discussion on implementing sustainability in wealth management. My name is Jan Langlo. I'm the manager of the Association of Swiss Private Banks. That is only one of the two associations that are organizing this panel discussion. The other is the Association of Wealth Management and Asset Management Banks, like a sister organization. And together we'll explain to you the priorities that our members are trying to put in place to integrate sustainability in everything they do. So let me first pinpoint something very important. We will talk about wealth management. That means that the banks that are members of our associations are not involved in investment in the sense of, in financing in the sense of lending money or raising capital for companies. That's a different job. Our members focus on wealth management for private and institutional clients. And to this end, since last year, the FAAFAO, which is the short version of the Asset Management and Wealth Management Bank Association, launched a branch initiative aiming at helping their private and institutional clients to contribute to more sustainability in their investments. At first, there were 12 members of the FAAFAO that joined this initiative. And this year, I'm quite glad to announce, or reiterate, since it was already announced a few days ago, that we are now 23 banks that have voluntarily joined this initiative to better integrate sustainability in wealth management. That is 14 members of the FAAFAO, all 8 members of the Association of Swiss Private Banks, and LGT Bank. Together, these 23 banks represent assets under management of 2.2 trillion Swiss francs. So previously, last year, there were already 1.2 trillion of Swiss francs that were aiming at implementing this initiative. Now we have nearly doubled it by being 2.2 trillion. So what exactly are we talking about? You are probably experts on sustainability by now, by the end of this Building Bridges Week. And you know that there are a lot of areas where there is work to do. What we aim for is 12 priorities. You will find on the table by the exit brochures for those that still like paper, either in French or in German, where you will find this picture and some others, because I know they are probably quite small. But basically, the 12 priorities are grouped in 4 categories. The first one is really about reducing the greenhouse gases emissions. The second is about the offering and advice that banks can produce. The third one is about the training of the bank staff. And the last one is about disclosure. We'll go further into each of these priorities as we go along. And to do this, I have the pleasure of moderating a wonderful panel. On my immediate left, we have Rosa Sangiorgio, the head of ESG at Banque Pictet et Compagnie SA. In the middle, we have Jean-Philippe Desmartins, head of corporate investment at Edmond de Rothschild. And last but not least, Frédéric Potel, head of research at Bordier and Company. And I am deeply sorry to say that unfortunately Christian Schiltz, who is the head of corporate sustainability at Vontobel, should have been with us. But again, this is a reminder that COVID is not completely gone, and he is unfortunately sick at home. So he could not join us, but I'm sure that these three representatives will be quite able to enlighten you, even though Christian Schiltz was the head of the expert group that worked on defining these priorities and keeping them up to date. You can see that we set up a Slido, so either type the number or scan the QR code. I'm sure you're quite familiar with this by now. And I'll be able to look at your question on my iPhone, so it's not that I'm no longer interested in what's happening, but just that I'm looking at your questions. For you in the room, for you online, if someone in the room wishes to say something longer than a simple question, then of course raise your hand and I'll try to see you, even though I have two lights in my eyes. But there we are. And since you will no longer see this slide, I put again the QR code at the bottom of this one, where we'll stay while I start asking a few questions. And the first one would be, and maybe Rosa, you can start answering, what drove your bank to participate in this initiative?
Someone would say that if you want to go far, you can't be alone. You need to go with your colleagues, peers, friends, family. And I think, this is the most important of the motivation. Sustainability, responsible investing is a journey. There are a lot of players that are doing a lot in the space in terms of learning, in terms of already investing, in terms of supporting with the regulation. We're not yet there. So the fact of having companions in the journey and also share experiences and understand which are the priorities, I think help all of us. So this is definitely one of the motivation. Another motivation is benchmarking, because you also want to know what the others in the industry are doing, because the others in the industry will be the competitors. So will be those that will also talk to your potential clients. So there may be a part of the benchmarking. This is important. And then a third point that I would add here is also the fact that keep an eye on what the others are doing, because you want them to go into the same direction. If the objective is being responsible, is because we know that people and the planet need us and need the profit that our clients are making when investing. And alone we can't move the needle, but together the financial industry and the wealth management industry can. So happy to participate in this, also to support those that need support and get support from those that are more advanced than us.
Thank you, Rosa. So companionship, benchmarking, support. Jean-Philippe, do you see the same reasons or others?
Hello, everyone. You notice that today, now, we have the last session of the day of the week, so you are all brave people in person and online. So thank you for being part of the journey. The ecosystem, Rosa said, moving collectively, it's very important. Especially keep in mind that when you look at the profile of our members, we are very different animals. Some of our members are very internationalized. Others are just having activities in Switzerland, and altogether, 98% of the asset under management decided to proactively move. So that's the first point. And it's not always easy to move collectively, so that's the first step. The second is that, as you will notice, and I'm sure we're going to convince you, the priorities from our side, that's actions, are very concrete. So the way we move is a pragmatic way, not a theory or ideology. And the last point is that when we've worked all together, we think about being consistent with what's going on in Switzerland, of course, but also at the EU level, and lastly, global international level. So we are thinking about one reporting, one action, and not triple reporting or triple action. So being coherent and consistent. That's my at least three reasons why our bank Edmond Rothschild decided to join. Thank you.
Frédéric, you reach for the mic.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I think I would answer going back to the basics. In fact, our view is that we are a bank, and a bank is a corporation, and a corporation is a person, in fact. And as we know, nothing will happen if we have to involve everyone in the system. And as a person, because we are a corporation and because we are a bank, we have to be involved and we have to lead the path on that field. The second maybe is that as we are at building bridges, it's the fact that we think Switzerland has a specific role to play within the financial industry, and we are pushing, and we're very happy that our institution in Switzerland are pushing this way and leading the path. And the third, of course, as my colleagues mentioned, we are stronger together. And on our side, maybe the specificity is that in front of you, you have different kind of and size of banks, and we would be the smaller one. And of course, it's very useful for us to better understand what has been done already by banks bigger than us, which started maybe a bit ahead of us in that direction, better understanding which kind of difficulties and obstacles they met in order to be more pragmatic. And of course, I share the view that this specific initiative and the 12 priorities are very pragmatic in their implementation, which is the Swiss way. In fact, we like. Yeah.
So we could sum it up in saying that a good side effect is that larger banks help smaller banks progress.
We hope so.
But progress where? And that's. I need to remind you of one figure. I don't know if you've already heard it this week, but banks in Switzerland, according to the Federal Office of Statistics, only produce 0.5 of the greenhouse gases emissions directly. Of course, when you take into account the Scope 3 emissions, then it's much more. But we'll see and talk about how much impact can we have on these Scope 3 emissions. So banks are not policemen. They are not there to forbid something. What is the role of a bank like yours with respect to sustainability?
So I would start by saying that in general, the financial industry is the bridge between people with money and people with ideas. And I mean, talking about bridges here is redundant, but it's very important to remember that the financial institution bring that bridge between those that have a surplus of money and those that actually have an idea, not yet the money, so they need financing. So very important to remember that. When we talk about specifically wealth management, we are dealing with private clients. And usually our objective is the one of supporting our clients to preserve their wealth across generation. So in that sense, we are a bridge between our clients and the investments that they do, so that the next generation will have a quality of life that is similar to one of the previous generation or better. And in that sense, and I go back to your question of what's the role of wealth management, for example. The role of wealth management, I see it as the entry point for investors, for clients, into the topic of investing. So we can be the entry point for the asset management industry. And if we are the entry point, and if we are those trusted advisors that talk to clients, then we have a fiduciary duty to create awareness. And this is actually one of the most important topics that we continuously talk among us in terms of wealth management, is the awareness of our clients. And we need to be competent on the topic so that we can share that awareness, and we need to walk the talk so that those words and that awareness that we create in client then will transform into the relationship with the client and then flows into sustainable activities.
Do you see it the same way, Jean-Philippe?
Yes, and to complete what Rosa said, I mean, the private sector has to do the job, and the bank has to do the job. So it means that it has also to first thing to its direct responsibility. So we publish every year a CSR report, and Alexia Breed, who is a colleague, could detail more. So you can have a look, it is public, and you can make your ideas regarding human resources, business ethics, and so on. Then you have the environment where we have maximum 1% where it's direct impact, maximum 1%. We have to do the job to show the way, because after when you discuss with corporates, if you haven't done the job, I mean, you are not consistent. So we do it progressively, and keep in mind that compensation is the last solution after all the effort we've made. And then, of course, the most important thing that has already been said, that's how we can impact with our investments. So that's a job that we collectively as a private sector, we have to do, having in mind that sustainable finance can do a lot, but not all. And we also have collectively to think about what we as citizens and what public authorities can do. That's why I think building bridges is so precious, because we have all the people together. So really that's a force. And there we will move. So it's not to escape from all the job we have to do, but think about that we need citizens, which are also our clients at the end of the day.
Frederic, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, again, I would be quite basic. I mean, we are wealth managers in our case, so I think our job and our role in the system is the role of the financial system as a whole. I think we are a necessary condition for success, and you cannot avoid, I mean, directing financial flows in the right direction. So we are a tool for that. I mean, there is no other way, but I mean, not alone. I mean, and in fact, we need the economy and the society to be put on the right trajectory, especially on the climate side. I mean, that cannot come from the financial industry and from the wealth manager. I mean, our role is to help and direct the flows. But if the policymakers, if the global leaders, if the CEOs of the big companies, if everyone, only if everyone put the entire system on the right trajectory. So, yeah, I think this is our role.
And I think that was the purpose of the whole week, to bring everybody together and to bring money with ideas together. So now, we are going to look deeper into these 12 priorities, which you see on the slide. Just to explain, the metrics that you see indicate the percentage of assets under management that are either already in a bank where this has been implemented, or this is in implementation, or this is planned to be implemented, depending whether you see dark gray, or light gray. And you can see that all lines reach nearly 100%, but within the 80–90% of each line, the proportion of implementation is different. And especially for the 3 first priorities, that's where it is the hardest. And of course, that's because we are talking there about reducing the greenhouse gas emissions. So let's start with number 3, actually. We'll do 3, 2, 1, because that's the chronological order. The The first one, number 3, would be for all the members that contribute to this initiative to sign one of the net zero initiatives by 2023. So my question then would be to you, which one are you focusing on and why? You are probably experts in net zero initiatives by now, but maybe you can explain better.
So on our side, we signed on the Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative. And the reason why we signed the Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative is because, as you know, in Pictet we have one big arm that is the asset management. And this is where, we have a lot of our investments directly in our funds. So we believe that as an asset manager, we can have a lot of impact if we include in the scope actually our investments. At the same time, what we have realized when we looked at the Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative, that at the time when we decided to sign, there were not very strict standards in terms of the reporting and not a lot of guidelines, and we felt we needed guidelines in terms of the implementation. That's why we also signed for the Science-Based Target Initiative. And from the Science-Based Target Initiative, we got a lot of guidelines and support into the implementation of the plan. Because obviously one thing is the signing, the second one is preparing the plan, then committing to the plan, and then executing the plan. So those are the two that we have worked on. Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative, Science-Based Target Initiative, and they are complementary to us.
Jean-Philippe?
Yes. What has been decided is that the asset management branch, which represents half of the activity of the bank, will sign first. The CEO, Christophe Caspar, announced that we shall announce that by the end of the year 2022. And for the rest, that's part of the discussions, and I hope in the next future I can come back to you with more information for the rest of the bank.
For us, it's quite difficult questions. Of course, we would exclude, as you mentioned, we are not a bank. I mean, we are not financing activities, we are not lending money. We are not doing capital operations on corporates, so of course the Net Zero Banking Alliance does not fit with who we are. So basically we would go and look at which one of the two remaining one is the best suited for who we are, what we are doing. What are we doing? We are managing portfolios for our private clients, and they have the choice. And I think we will learn very, very soon if they are interested or not in being involved, as you know, for regulatory reasons, starting next year. So in our case, we'll start to see which kind of portfolio our clients want. And in our case, we are managing thousands of clients with mandates, but we have to know before implementing something what they would like to be done. That being said, I think the best among the three alliances we have on the table, the one which suits the best is, for me, the Net Zero Asset Managers Alliance, as for Pictet, but maybe for different reasons, just because the two other ones do not really fit with who we are, in fact.
Thank you, Frédéric. Now, signing one of these initiatives is something. Actually, achieving the goals that they represent is another. And that's where the first two priorities are harder to achieve, and that's why nothing is yet implemented, because there are two goals. The first one is to achieve a reduction path of greenhouse gases emissions of 50% for the treasury book and own operations by 2030. That's priority number two. And number one is actually to achieve the net zero target for the same by 2050, but also for all the assets that are being managed, and that includes clients' money. So my question with respect to these two priorities would be, which obstacles do you see on your greenhouse gas emissions reduction path?
So I could stay here 5 hours, but I guess that, it's probably already late, as you said, the last panel. So I will keep my comment to a couple of points and bring one point regarding our own operations. As you mentioned, and as you mentioned also, when we talk about our greenhouse gas emission, one thing is the greenhouse gas emission that we emit as an organization, because we are an organization, so we have electricity, heating, and so we are an organization that produces greenhouse gas emission. The other thing is the emissions of our investments. So on the operations, I think that the majority of our greenhouse gas emission are indirect. So the direct one, for example, the electricity, the heating, those are direct ones, and this represents around 30% of our emissions. And then the rest that would consider, for example, the commuting of our colleagues to the place of work, but also the emissions when we do business travels. This represents the 70% of it. And one thought on reducing our greenhouse gas emission. Between 2007 and 2019, we reduced by 73%. So we already have quite a good base to start. And then we are planning to reduce another 60% by 2025. And one of the key challenge for us is business travel. Because as we are covering clients in the wealth management space, and we are based in Geneva and few other countries in the world, but we travel around to meet our clients. So it's part of our business culture, and it is difficult to achieve. We are working, our colleagues are working a lot on finding the best way, because we don't want, obviously, to cannibalize our business. The second topic that I will touch on regarding our investments, because we are committing also to reducing greenhouse gas emission there. It is slightly easier when you invest directly in securities, so in equities and in bonds, because you have direct access to the data, and you can engage with the companies that you have in the portfolio so that they reduce, that they make a plan, or that they sign science-based target initiative. More complicated is when you invest in third-party funds. And as wealth manager, obviously, we have open architecture, so we invest in third-party funds. So what we are trying to do is that we are trying to engage with the fund managers that we onboard on our platform and ensure that they also sign a zero asset manager initiative or science-based target initiative, but it's obviously another layer, so it becomes more complicated. But it's part of engaging with the industry.
So to complete what Rosa said, regarding our operations, we started something like in 2016 or 2017. So I don't say it's easy, but I mean, we all have a good curve of experience. For the treasury book, I have to say that the team internally are very ambitious and really ready to move. So now we have the difficulty, which is regarding methodology and data. Methodology, because we can consider that scope 1 and scope 2 when we think about climate change, okay. But we want to have on board scope 3 because, as you perhaps know, scope 3 is the elephant in the room. That's something like 80 or 90% of the story. So we have to embark, but methodologies are not stabilized. And as we also do consider that climate change is a question of risk, but also opportunities, we embark also the scope 4, so to avoid it, to think about investing in solutions dealing with climate change. And there, it's not stabilized, and there is finally the question of data. So it's not to say that we don't have to move, because some of us started 20 years ago, and we had no methodology and no data, and we started. So we have to do it, but keep in mind that methodologies and data are not yet stabilized, especially for scope 3 and scope 4, which are really the two elephants in the room, if I may say.
Yes, on our side, maybe the first obstacle is that as we are smaller and younger, we're starting from scratch. But we'll start, of course. The first things I like to do for our treasury book, and in fact, I will do it not only for our treasury book, but also for our own pension fund, because as a private banker, we are managing our own pension fund, and it is a very good exercise, because a treasury book, especially if it's not too risky, is not a very big cross-asset portfolio or investment. whereas a pension fund is much more diversified with alternative classes, with private equity, with infrastructure, with real estate, with everything. So I think the exercise is much more interesting on a pension fund compared to a treasury book, even if the priority here, which is set, is concerned the treasury book. So our target is to have a look at this, and we have now a new tool which has been given yesterday and communicated yesterday about this Swiss climate scores with a very simple to use template. So I will use this template in order to assess our treasury book and our pension fund in the next probably 6 months as a first step, and then give a feedback to the Swiss climate scores. This is for the financial investments. And now for our operation, again, I would say, being a private banker, if you're a private banker, what it's all about is it's about service, and it's about traveling and meeting clients. I mean, our private bankers, they want to travel and meet their clients, and their clients want their private banker to travel to them and meet with them. So this will be a huge obstacle, because that will be, I think, in our operations, the one which is the hardest to abate, in fact. This is the obstacle in my view. Yeah.
The personal relationship remains important,
exactly,
even in the age of digitalization.
Yeah. And they've been eating Zoom meetings for 2 years now, so they want to travel.
This seems like a perfect time to address the currently most popular question. I'm sure you'll like it. Isn't it greenwashing to come up with measures that are quite low in terms of ambitions to ensure that you are almost, of course, 100% successful in them? I'll try to answer first, and then I'll tell you another question, and you can answer them jointly. The fact that the line goes nearly to the end at each time is not a measure of success. It's a measure of commitment. And again, this initiative is voluntary, which means that you have banks that do not feel yet ready. But when you look at the assets under management of these banks, you realize that it is not so bad if they take a little more time, because the largest players are committed and are moving. Now, saying that we are not ambitious enough, you will tell me about that, but I think reaching a halving of the emissions by 2030, not for the clients one, okay, but eliminating it or reducing them to net zero by 2050, it is quite something. And that goes along with another question, which is, what is the deadline for these priorities? I just reminded them that, are they ambitious enough? So my question for you, my additional question for you would be, do you feel like you could reach these targets sooner than 2030 and 2050?
So I think, that's it's very important to remember what we are talking about. You're talking about target, and we are talking about an initiative of the industry. The fact that we are having those targets by 2025, 2030 reflects the common path. It doesn't mean that if we believe that we can achieve earlier, we will not. It means that we want to be inclusive and we want to be sure that we all go together. None of the bank that is in this initiative will slow down because the others are not moving. So we are all moving and we are all actually competing with each other, so we will not slow down. But what I want to comment a little bit on the kind of, how ambitious are there, and the greenwashing piece, is not. I think sometimes there is a little bit of a chicken and egg situation with this greenwashing problem, because the problem is that if your ambitions are too ambitious and then you will not achieve them, then you will in any case be accused of something. So the counterintuitive effect of all this greenwashing media conversation that we are having is that yes, in some cases ambitions are put down. In some cases, this has happened. Similarly to the regulation that we have in the EU, all the conversation that we had, you have a minimum standard that has been built that probably is not ambitious enough. Then I believe that it's for each of us to know that these are some topics and targets that we are having today, and that we are building together, that we have an objective as an industry, and it's quite impressive, I would say, that as an industry we come up with self-regulation. I would like you to search maybe on Google. I didn't do it, so it's not, it's not a trick. How many other countries have created this type of self-regulation for their industry? I'm not sure there are so many. So I think, in this sense, I think we are leaders in the space for having those targets, and we are targeting the key important things.
So yes, there is a climate change urgency. I mean, you noticed it this summer again, for those who remember already. Then the targets we have are in fact very ambitious, because the reality today is that we have globally plus 1.1 degrees, and that's sure for the next 100 years. And we collectively contribute to try to limit between 1.5 and 2. Some experts say that perhaps in 10 years we will reach 1.5 degrees for the next 100 years. So it's not so easy to deal with that, collectively. Just one word regarding greenwashing. Greenwashing is when you don't do what you say, when you don't walk the talk. That's simply that. And then also you have to be transparent to show the work you do. But then after, we could have a never-ending and stay together 5 or 10 years regarding greenwashing, because, all people, all citizens, all media, all corporates have a different view on what we say. And some people will always say that we don't do enough, and I like that we are, challenged. That's a good thing. But what is important is really to be transparent and explain what we do and do it.
I would fully agree, of course, with what has been said just now. But maybe taking another perspective, I think being an engineer by first education, and I've been working for 15 years in the energy sector and the infrastructure sector, I can tell you it's much more easy to set standards, calculation methods on temperatures and climate trajectory, and implementing that in funds or private portfolios than doing the job in the real economy. I think people really underestimate by far, very far, the inertia of the system. When you say you have to clean the mobility, for example, industry, or when you say you have to clean the power generation industry, or in 2050, we are talking about net zero. Okay, so the net zero, and this is greenwashing, has been used very recently by a number of industries, like air traveling, for example, saying, okay, you can fly net zero because I will offset. And this is bullshit for me. The net zero from the policymakers means, first, you reduce the emissions as much as you can, including the sectors which are hard to abate, and the teeny part which remains, which is 8 billion tons in 2050, then should be not offset, but captured. This is the real net zero. Offsetting with, okay, if you take a plane ticket and we will plant 10 trees, is bullshit for me. And it will take much more efforts, and it will take much longer for, fighting the inertia of the systems in the real economy than we will have in the financial sector. I've been working in both of them. It's much more easy on our side. And internally, in order to avoid the greenwashing, for example, on this traveling for the private bankers, of course, the temptation from our management and the private bankers themselves would be to say, okay, I will take plane like hell, but we will offset. And I would say, no, we have to cut this as much as we can, as much as it is reasonable for doing our job, and then we'll see. So we'll be pragmatic, but I think it's much more easy to be in our chair than in the chair of heavy loaded in CO2 industry. Much more easy.
Good point. Thank you, Frederic. And it's true, the change has to occur in the whole economy and in all society. But that means companies have to change first, and then we are there to help move capital towards them for them to achieve their goals. And we move now towards the second set of priorities, which are indeed looking at this. Priority number 4 is integrating ESG considerations across research, advisory, and investment processes. And as we can see, only a small part has already been done, whereas most banks, nearly all banks, have started. But something is probably a grain of sand in the wheels. Can you maybe tell us where exactly it's more difficult?
So first of all, we need to define what does it mean ESG integration. ESG integration means that you have the data. It means that you understand the data. Then you can value the data, so understand and distinguish. And third, very important, is that you use the data in your investment process for the discretionary mandate, for the advisory mandate. So it's a series of things. So I think that a lot of us have gathered the data. At least on our side, we have a huge ESG scorecard. We have gathered a lot of data. We have understood how to use those data. We have created a framework. We now know that there are some, for some companies, some of the data are financially material and etc. For some industries, the scope 3 is relevant, for others not. In some cases, for the scope 3, you can use the algorithm of one of the provider and not of the other provider. We have analyzed the correlations. So we have done a lot of work on the data, and now we are using them in the investment process. But then the other point is it the same across asset classes? Again, if you look at equities or corporate bonds, you look at the issuer, and then you have more or less a clear understanding. Then you need to look at the funds, the third-party funds. How do you work with the third-party funds? With the third-party funds, you can either look through, but then it's a backward-looking situation because you maybe have the composition of that fund as 1 month old, and it's potentially by luck that this fund today, has that configuration. So you need to do a due diligence on the third-party fund manager and understand what do they do on ESG. Complicated, but then you do. You build your due diligence, the tools, and etc. Then there are some other asset classes. You were mentioning hedge funds before. Think about derivatives. Well, what does it mean for an hedge fund manager to integrate ESG? So for those where you can get to the underlying, it's, you make the connection, but then there are a lot of complex derivatives behind. So this is where we are actually working on. So there are some other asset classes where it's more complicated. And, hedge fund obviously is typical, but think about government bonds. So what does it mean, ESG integration in government bonds? It means having a look if what is the US Treasury declaring in terms of net zero asset manager, in terms of net zero commitment, or is also looking about the death penalty. I mean, there are a lot of conversations that we are having also on those topics. Commodities. What do we do with commodities? How do you ESG integrate a commodities? If you have gold in your vault for which you don't know where it comes from, would you ever be able to integrate ESG there? I mean, the only way that you have to integrate ESG is to say that you don't know, because you don't have the provenance, or to change the full vault and sell the old one and buy new. So there are a lot of consideration behind, and I think that's the reason why you see that we are working, but we're not fully yet there. and we will do our best to achieve the targets.
So Rosa said a lot of great things. A way to progress is to have, at the same time, a top-down and a bottom-up approach. Top-down, it means globally at the level of the bank, and that's what we do. We have a committee where we try to select common tools. I mean, to have the same voice, if I may say, the same message, and to coordinate. That's an example. But then, and Rosa explained very clearly the things, we have to be very concrete and starting with bottom-up, because we have a lot of different investment processes. I mean, investment grade is not high yield. Small and mid-cap in Europe are not a blue chip in the emerging. And I have a colleague here present who invests in the emerging countries. That's a good challenge that we have every day. Just for the example of access to data. So here we really have to do some bottom-up approach and to try to be at the same time, consistent and coherent at the level of the bank, but also really find the differences that we have to manage, and think also that ESG, it's not only climate change, that all environmental fields, water, biodiversity, etc., all social issues, and all governance issues. So good complexity to embark.
Yeah, on our side, how to say that? When we started in that journey, which was 3-4 years ago, said of course many things were already done, and many things have been said in the previous 15-20 years already. But the fact is that when you look at this issue, and the consideration is what is really ESG, as you very well explained, of course. And the conclusion we reached was, who are we? We are private bankers. We are not here to give lessons. We are not here to make philosophy. We are here to manage the money and the wealth and the portfolios of our clients. So considering the fact, and I think we'll come back on this, that there is no international standards, no international taxonomy, no international blah, 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 we said, okay, we think these old-fashioned and outdated debates about, exclusion, this is good, this is bad, this is not, this is less bad, etc., are not ours. We don't want to come on this. And then our approach was to say, as far as ESG is concerned, then we would take it the other way. We would say, our job, who we are, our job is to manage the portfolio, and these E, S, and G, as you mentioned, are risks in the assets. So we would better go for a methodology which is to check what are the risks in terms of E, S, and G. So I don't know if we're allowed to advertise here, but when we had a look to the providers, because we don't have the means, to have 50 or 100 analysts, talking to 3,000 companies worldwide, of course not. So the only way for us was to get provided with external data and ratings. And the fact is that when we were looking at that, the only one which took our attention was the one dealing with the ESG risks, which was Canadian. So this is what we are doing, with the goal that we manage a portfolio and that the expected return of our portfolio is not hurt by the way we are advising investments, but we would reach a better risk-adjusted expected return thanks to the ESG risks management. So this is the way. And this is on the side of do not hurt, ESG. And the second conclusion we reached was that our job, and in order to help the economy to be put on the right trajectory, would better to move directly on the impact side, doing well. And this is what we did. And of course, when we think about investment and assets, many people only think about equities. And again, it's very hard to say, is ABB a positive impact company? I mean, it's in itself, you could have a PhD on that. I mean, but so of course we select companies and equities for our portfolios, which have, I mean, a commitment, a strategy, strategic planning, and the finance and the budgets and the balance sheet and everything for reaching their commitments. But this is for equities. Now, we think there is much more beauty on the bonds side, in fact. And the reason to that is that when you issue a bond, you have to write a prospectus, which is not the case when you're listed. I mean, of course, you issue a kind of prospectus for being listed as an equity. But in the case of a bond, you have to explain the use of proceeds of this bond. So in that case, if I take ABB or anyone else, the question of is ABB doing well as an equity company is just beside. But if you are raising money for this bond for doing something which reduces your CO2 footprint, and if in addition to that there is a third party, obviously, hopefully independent third party, telling us this is a real green and climate bond, then it's okay for us. So, and this is the reason why we treated that question by becoming a partner and partnering with the Climate Bond Initiative for being sure that the bonds we were selecting are labeled green and climate bonds by an independent body. So we can combine the fact that it's a labeled green and climate bond and the fact that we are, because it's our job, we are maybe not good, but it's our knowledge to select bonds on the credit part of it, and then build portfolios with label green and climate bonds, which are good for our clients and doing good for the planet. This is how we are implementing this.
Yes, and for that you need a lot of data, indeed. There is a question for that is getting a lot of votes, and I think you need to answer it. How are you interpreting your role as wealth manager with the enforcement of the new Swiss regulation on shareholder rights, especially concerning proxy voting? And I guess that goes hand in hand with another question about engagement and how far do you go or can you go?
That's a fantastic question. So I will offer a coffee to whoever asked that question. So active ownership is key. You know, we can't talk about responsible investors without active ownership. Exclusions, you know, managing portfolio, excluding companies is a thing of the past. This we know. We know that if we sell one company, someone else will buy it and the company will continue to do exactly what they were doing before. In the worst case scenario, they will actually become private and have even less rules. So our, let's say, duty as investors is to be active owners of the company we invest in. And being active owners means engage with the companies, so talk to the companies we are investing in, ask the right question, and vote. This is happening continuously and since years in the fund management industry, less in the wealth management industry. And the reason why it's happening less in the wealth management industry is a question of resources and competence, but also is a bit of a technical situation. If you are a fund manager, you manage your fund, Fund X. This fund is a legal entity that can go and vote, you know, directly as one, directly at the assembly. When you are a wealth manager and you manage discretionary mandates, maybe you have 10,000 of clients that you are managing and have a position in this famous ABB that you want to vote for. And often when you go and try to vote, depending on the legislation, you may have to vote one by one those clients. So fill in 10,000 papers, or eventually disclose the beneficial holder behind. So it's more complicated. So that's why few of us are voting. We have started voting in Pictet in 2021 was the first year that we voted. We voted on around 65 stocks for around 5 billion of assets. This year already we raised to 8 billion for around 85 stocks. So it's difficult. You need the resources. You can make it, but you need a lot of resources and competence, and it's, I believe it's key.
Yes, voting is key. It's like democracy. We're happy to have the possibility to vote when we can. So private bankers, there are three different situations that can be invested in internal funds. And EDRAM or asset management, we vote every year 95%, which is quite a good score. And we vote generally 25%. We compare with 20, so we are quite demanding, and not demanding in theory, because that's for the reputation of our bank and for our clients. Then the private bankers can be invested in external funds, Pictet or Bordier, for instance, and there, I mean, they rely on what do the other colleagues. That's why the fact that we are together is important, because we benchmark. And then the most difficult is when they are invested in direct lines, because perhaps there at this level we are less, I mean, coordinated than the asset management branch, which is quite well organized, because institutional investors, I mean pension funds, insurance companies, etc., have requested very seriously that we do the job, and the journey started 20, 30 years ago. So that's the landscape that I can present.
Yeah, nothing much to say. We are, I mean, almost 100% managing private portfolios, so we are not really the owner of the shares. Nevertheless, maybe, so of course we're less advanced, and here maybe I will take advantage of this benchmarking and talking with my bigger colleagues. Maybe one thing is that thanks to this approach for ESG risks, starting to avoid investing in companies where you've got huge and explicit governance risks, for example, is already a good filter. I mean, of course, I know it's not a fully satisfactory answer compared to the question, but I mean, if you're not invested in really bad governance, it's already a good thing.
Okay, so we spoke a lot about companies. Now we must speak a little about the clients whose money you're actually managing. And there is a priority number 6, which requires you to provide them with more transparency on their share, on the share of the portfolio that qualifies as sustainable. This is work in progress. It's also part of what Swiss banking is requiring the banks to do. My question to you would be, how much demand do you see from clients? And do you see trends between categories of clients?
I will start by saying that obviously we have very different type of clients. So when you talk about institutional clients, the institutional clients are since a few years asking for more transparency, more information, and more disclosure. That is getting standardized. So if 5 years ago, every institutional client would come with the different type of metrics that they want to have. Now it's a little bit more standardized, but there is the demand from the institutional investors to get those data, to get disclosure. On the client side, in terms of the private clients, we do not see specific requests of disclosure. But what happens is that once that we show something, then we realize that there is an important interest. So we believe that the interest is there, is not proactive, is being reactive until now. So as soon as you start showing some numbers, they are very interested, and it helps us engaging in the conversation which is important. And also what I've realized with private clients is that they are more interested in metrics that they can rely to or they can understand than metrics that are a bit more, let's say, high level. So for example, they would not be interested in your portfolio has an ESG risks of 5.6, because ESG risks is a very vague thing, and it really depends on the methodology that you have behind. They would be very interested into understanding which is the greenhouse gas emission intensity of their portfolio, because it's more concrete. They could be very interested in how many companies in your portfolios do not have women as board members, or this type of question. They are questions that they connect more to.
I think we all collectively have the same message from management or shareholders. One, accelerate, regarding sustainable finance, and it's a business, and we are in the private sector. But rule number two, no greenwashing. So perhaps you will come back to the point. We do, I think, support the fact there are some regulation which will ask to the clients, that's for instance MiFID, but I think we will have it also in Switzerland, to the clients directly, what is your test regarding sustainable finance? Do you want some, no, yes, a lot, and do you have some preferences? It will be, I think, a plus, to accelerate the dispositif. To take an example, in our bank, we launched 5-6 years ago some SRI, Sustainable Responsible Investment Mandates, where the clients can ask a balance or dynamic solutions. So it's a way to increase and to progress. The good news is that the financial results of our clients is encouraging. So I'm not here to do some advertising, but just we can compare SRI mandates and traditional mandates, and everyone, the client, the private banker, are fine with that. And the only figure I can give you is regarding our asset management listed activities, where we have 86 AUM, Article 8, and 9, with the objective of 100%, but we don't give a year, because really the objective is that we want all portfolio managers to be comfortable to reach the 16% still, which are in Article 6, and perhaps it will take 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, but really the motivation is very important, and we want all portfolio managers to be comfortable before moving from Article 6 to Article 8 or 9.
On our side, I think it would be lying if I say there is a huge demand or if expectations are really big from our customer. We're not facing like a wave of pool demand. It's not true. Reversely, conversely, if we try to bring some ideas and solutions, there are some private bankers and clients who are interested in. But I think we have to take the things in the right way, because all this landscape is like a jungle, for the public. And I think we have to explain, educate, train first, and then when we make sure that everyone understands more or less the same, we're talking the same language, then we can move to the next step. But as of today, no, the demand is not so huge.
So what steps are you taking to educate your clients, make them aware, and maybe even encourage them to get a little less return in exchange of having more impact on towards a more sustainable world?
I think this wouldn't be the right message. If you start by saying your return would be lower or much lower, it's not maybe the best way. And I think it's not true, by the way. So the first step is to train and educate our own employees and portfolio managers and bankers. And this is what we've been doing. We've been training 100% of our employees. That was our 2022 main target, so it's been done, explaining what is sustainability, what is sustainable finance, and what are we doing or what are we proposing as of today and where we want to go. And this has been done. And along with this, we just prepared, very pragmatically again, a very short 4 slides handbook to be given to the bankers and to their clients, trying to create a link and a conversation with the clients on this.
Yes, education, awareness, trainings are really the priority #1, and internally as a first step. Human resources is key, department, to coordinate all that, because it's training, it's normal development of all, because the large majority of the people didn't have some education when they were at the university or before. It does change. So it's normal that a lot of people say, oh, what's new? Oh, it's strange. So we are going. I think we can think about having general awareness on the definition of ESG, and then also more specialized trainings on climate or biodiversity. And you can both have internal capacities and use also external capacities with some expert presenting in a simple way the challenges that we have internally. And then, everyone is more comfortable to discuss and address the issues with the clients.
Absolutely, I fully agree with my colleagues here. First, you need to train internally. None of our bankers would ever go out to talk to a client of a topic they are not comfortable with. So the first step has been for us having a mandatory internal training, so everybody is trained on the topic. Very important what you said. There is a space for internal training. We need to ensure that everybody speaks the same language, because this is also very important. We are often using, different terminology for saying the same thing. So we need to be sure that within the organization we all use the same terminology, so clients will not get confused after. But then there is also an important space for external trainings. So there are specific functions that need to have their own training. So my team, the ESG team, has created a mandatory training for everyone, but I require the investment risk team, the compliance team, to actually do their own training, because those are the ones that need to control us. So otherwise it would be complicated. Then you have a series of specific trainings. So in Europe, with MiFID II, we built a training on client sustainability preferences. We created a training on net zero, so on all these specific topics. And this is all internal. And it needs to go together with, the awareness externally. Awareness externally, we are usually doing it by being here, but also writing articles, participating to conferences, so that our bankers see us there, see us as professionals, can share the information with their clients and start creating this connection. And the last thing that I would say is that another part of my approach is actually going with bankers to meet clients. Because one thing is when you do the training and they do the test, another thing is that when you go with the banker to the client, and then at the end of the meeting, the client thanks the banker, finally have understood things, and the banker is so proud that we have that competence and etc. Then he will bring you to other clients, then he will tell his colleagues, actually, this topic is a very interesting topic, because I've known now this client for 10 years, and he never told me that. Now I know that he has a daughter. So this type of conversation.
And we have a question here. Do you feel there is enough academic education and training to build or transmit the knowledge that your relationship managers need?
Yeah, very good question. 20 years ago, there was zero lessons, courses, and so on. Now, you go in all universities, everything, business school, you have courses. So that's really a good move. And I think that if you want to do something, you really can coordinate. And here in Geneva, in this room, every year there are really interesting meetings. So I think now we are better organized to develop key links between academics and practitioners that we are. I will say that we are on a turning point today as in the 1950s or 1960s, the School of Chicago brought together academics and practitioners for the traditional finance. For sustainable finance, we have this period where we have to embark academics in order to progress technically, but also institutionally. I mean, in terms of license to operate, and showing that, I mean, it's not only a good thing, blah, 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 but with some academic research, yes, as academic, I can show you that in terms of risk, etc., volatility, you can do it.
I think it's a very good point. It's now it's in the universities and high schools and so on, for sure. But the fact is that you are here and your pyramid of ages is centered on 52 years, more or less, as we are. So by definition and by construction, our bankers, our investment guys were not primarily educated. So what we're doing in our house is to promote the certification, and this has become one of the indicator of our executive committee dashboard. We are following our people in investment and in portfolio management and in relationship management, and we know that as of today, 20% of our guys and ladies have been certified with much, I mean, big or smaller certificates, but different kind of certificates, and we are pushing for that, and we are making progress on that, and this is one of our priorities. Yeah. As for any other part of the job, I mean, this sustainable finance is a new chapter, and they have to be educated and trained and certified for that.
Okay, so you are training your relationship managers. The rest of your staff has to have a basic understanding of sustainability. And then you're trying to educate the clients too. I have a question here that says that sustainability is a personal matter. Yes, everybody has a different view on what is most important. How do you align your clients' personal values to the products you sell them? How do you match exactly what the client wants and what you can offer him?
I mean, I can share what I do personally, and then I will tell also what the organization does. First of all, since 2nd of August 2022, all organizations that are offering investment solutions in the EU have to ask their clients to fill in a client sustainability preference questionnaire. In that sense, we would ask to the client, first of all, if they have sustainability questionnaire or sustainability preferences, and the client can answer yes or no. And then if they have sustainability preferences, we would ask them if those preferences would be on the side of avoiding doing harm, so the principal adverse impact, or is in the space of making sustainable investments, so the negative side, say avoiding harm, or making investments on the positive side. So this is actually what the regulation is asking. Obviously, when we talk about sustainable investments, in the regulation, you know better than me that there is the definition of SFDR that includes both the environmental part and the social part, and there is the EU taxonomy with the 6 pillars on the environment side. Now, is this enough to explore the values of your clients? Probably not. From my perspective, usually I have very open conversations with clients and try to actually read between the words. Because often if you ask the clients which are your values, it will be a very short conversation. Because it's very difficult to answer this type of question. But if you, during the conversation, realize that their grandparents had a farm, and when they were kids, they were producing apples, and you feel that there is a link with agriculture, then this is probably something that you can explore. If you realize that they have a daughter that is now suffering because she goes to a school where are all men, etc. So that potentially gender diversity is a topic that you can talk about. If they have a sailing boat, and they usually go around the world with this sailing boat, then the oceans and plastic are topics. So, but it's very difficult to kind of create a questionnaire. To me, it's more about knowing your clients, and I think that our bankers are very well positioned to know their clients and where is the hook, and that's what we try to teach them, to connect that hook to a sustainable investment.
Okay, that's why also the personal relationship is also very important, so they can really understand what motivates a person. I doubt an algorithm could replace that. But Jean-Philippe, for instance, what would you tell a client who tells you, I'm not interested at all in sustainability?
But, whatever we are in the private bank or institutional, it arrives every day. We have to be frank. Some clients say, I don't care, and we have to respect. That's the will of the client, and that's it. But we have some global exclusion for all the bank. Controversial weapons. Clients cannot say, sorry, but controversial weapons are bullshit. This is the license to operate that we have. So we respect completely clients' will, but there are some points where, as a bank, and that's the reputation of the bank, but also it can be law, it can be the shareholders, we say, we have these rules, and I gave the example of controversial weapons. Just to complete, in the SRI mandates, it's much more easier to do some tailor-made. And then SRI mandates or not, when we think about the private banks, the clients are generally, and when they are interested, and family offices, they are very interested in priority by environmental solutions, whatever in listed assets or real assets. That's the entry number one. In all countries, Switzerland, US, France, that's the need number one. And new moves we see because of COVID, and unfortunately COVID, I don't say post-COVID, social issues are already coming back at the front of the interest of our clients. They need simple, that's why thematics is, and at Pictet, thematic can be, powerful, because it's a simple message, and you can prove it in 30 seconds. Because when you take other methodologies such as best in class, it's very complex. You can spend hours with institutional. But for the private bankers, you need simple things, and thematics are powerful for that.
Okay, sorry, I see time is flying, so I won't let you anymore each answer each question. Frédéric, a question for you. What do you miss to make further progress on your road to sustainable investment?
Time, of course, but this is not a good reason. Standards, international standards. Of course, you can read that in parallel with financial information. If we have to reach the same kind of standard and practices, this is first, in order to avoid all these never-ending discussions. We need a big push from the governments and the world leaders, I think. I mentioned I was in that, not in that business, but on the industry side, in the energy sector, and I started to look at CO2 emissions and climate change and everything in 2002, means just 20 years ago. And at that time, the emissions were 23 billion tons a year, and we're at 36 from fossil energy. So in the meantime, we had 20 COPs and ever-rising emissions. So, we have to be much more stringent, and there is a need for action, but we spend too much time on words and discussions.
So now we need action, and to do proper action we need data. Jean-Philippe, do you feel that you get enough data about companies, or? what would you wish?
I was saying question of data methodologies. I would like to come back to another key point. I'm a former entrepreneur, so I'm not obsessed by regulation. Please trust me. But I think we need some regulation. And then we need a clever, responsible, simple regulation, and if possible, global one, in order to avoid to do for each country everything different. But I'm not here to tell you that regulation is the only solution, but now I think that we need, of course, all the market moves, but also some right regulation.
Thank you. I have to be honest with you, and I'm sorry for all those who ask questions that I haven't taken up. Being frank, there are some nasty questions, you know, also.
Wow.
People who feel that we are not doing enough, not going fast enough, not going further enough. So to address this, maybe Rosa, what would you say to those people who are making reproaches to the wealth management industry?
So the first thing that you can do is look at your pension fund. A lot of us, we have a pension fund. And look at how is invested your pension fund. And check your pension fund if they are going in the direction that you want them to go. And if not, raise your hand. Tell them. Go to your banker if you have a bank account and tell them. Because one of the issues that we have in the industry, and if you're talking about, you know, how can we go faster, is client demand. So I would actually tell that, you know, we want to get there, and we are doing everything that we can do in our power. Obviously, when you are a wealth manager, you have some discretionary assets where you make the decision, some advisory assets where the client is making the decision, and some execution only when the client makes the full decision. So the most important thing that we need to hear is client demand, client coming and asking. And I want to go back to one of the topic that we were discussing about you were asking, what do you say to a client that tells you that he doesn't care about sustainability? Honestly, I never had the pleasure. Because I'm a head of ESG, and I brought to clients that actually want to invest in impact and ESG, so I never had the pleasure. But if I had the pleasure to meet a client, I would like to listen to the reason. I want to listen, because I'm pretty sure that there are very good reasons behind, you know, the fact that he doesn't want to invest in sustainability. And if I can imagine, and I'm actually, each of you that are in the audience, or my colleagues, if you have experience, share it with me. I'm curious. But I think, you know, that one of the reasons may be that they feel that investing, looking at environmental, social, and governance characteristics, or even going in the positive impact space, they would have to give up on returns. And if the client comes and tells, I don't want to invest in sustainability because I don't want to give up on returns, I would be happy to talk about the fact that in the past 20 years, we made a lot of experience in the space, and we can now easily say that we can offer you a very good track record with very good returns. So you don't have to actually be preoccupied in that sense. Investing, looking at environmental, social, and governance characteristics improves actually the risk return of your portfolio. And even you have the possibility to invest sometimes in positive impact in the innovation of the future. So you will be investing in those leaders of the future that will be profitable. Sorry, Frederick, you want to say something?
No, I mean, especially talking about risk-adjusted returns, yes. Especially. And for impact, then you could convince clients, even if we have to respect their will, of course, but if you invest in impact, then by the way, you are investing in growth at the end. And growth is the future, so yeah.
Jean-Philippe, is there a last thing you would like to say? Because otherwise I think I need to conclude so that we keep the time.
Yes, sustainability, and including, of course, sustainable finance, is a world where, in addition to the discussion you have with your clients, your shareholders, and your regulators, you have discussion with other stakeholders, such as NGOs. And the NGOs, they will challenge you, so we need to be challenged, and thank you. But then some NGOs are quite brutal with no solutions, and some NGOs are constructive and ready to discuss with you, and even ready to think about new products where they give their input at their point of view. And there you can build a new solution for clients and try with modesty to embark all the critics, and we are, open to critics to progress.
Okay, thank you. And before concluding, I will just answer a last, I would say, nearly administrative question, but it's true that there are so many associations in Switzerland that it's easy to get lost. The two associations who organize this panel are branch associations that are underneath Swiss Banking. Swiss Banking is the fêtière, the holding federation for all banks in Switzerland. We represent two branches, the wealth management branches and the private banks. It's two different associations for historical reasons, but basically we are united in the sense that we focus on one métier, which is the wealth management, and we manage assets for private and institutional clients. But again, as I said in the beginning, we do not lend, we do not make credits, we do not raise capital. And as Rosa said in the beginning, we are intermediaries between money and ideas or realizations in the real economy. And in that sense, as intermediaries, we are quite willing to play our part in favor of sustainability by helping ideas and money encounter each other. However, as we discussed in quite some length, the other person in between, that is the one that owns the money, the client. And that's why we are educating them, training our staff, and we never stop until they have all understood and are convinced. But it is not so easy, and we have to respect the free will of each client too. That brings also the question of the fiduciary duty that we have towards client, and you may have heard Patrick Odier at the beginning of the Building Bridges Summit say that maybe we need to rethink the content of the fiduciary duty. This was picked up by the press. Is it only maximizing return, or is it something else? I guess we know in our hearts what the answer is, but it's not always easy to actually do it. So to convince clients, we need data from the real economy, from companies, and that's what is actually missing. Banks are doing some analysis of the biggest companies, but actually what is going to happen in the next years is that companies themselves, first the largest one, but then the scope will probably grow and grow, will publish data over their climate risk and their impact also on climate. And then that's the first step. That's the TCFD recommendations. But you will soon get the TNFD recommendations for the impact on nature and that nature has on it. And it will keep on going, I'm sure, so that in the end we not only know how much good money a company can make, but also how much good a company can make. So money is a necessary condition for the success of sustainability, but certainly not the only one. And it is not enough by itself to throw money somewhere. You need people who will actually accomplish something. And for that, we need all stakeholders, that is companies, consumers, regulators, politicians, academia, and banks to work together. And we hope that this week has helped build bridges between them all. I thank you again a lot for attending this session, either on site or online. For those who are on site, then this was the last of the many events of this week. But to celebrate it, there is a gathering and a cocktail in the village, which you are all invited to join. I think we are right on time, and I wish you a very pleasant evening.